Do you suffer from pain, OCD, cognitive decline issues, stress, anxiety, depression? If you suffer from any of these conditions, perhaps this is the show for you. Today we have John Silva, DC, and I met him a long time ago. We'll probably unravel all this in the conversation today. And he's going to share how neurofeedback can change your life and effectively overcome brain-based disorders. What is neurofeedback? Go get your paper and pencil, or paper and pencil, pen, whatever it is that you need to get, because we're going to learn and grow together.
And when you need a friend, you can count on me. I'll be right here waiting for you.
Hi, my name is Lillian McDermott, and I am a certified life coach and the host of the Lillian McDermott radio show, Classroom. If this is the first time that you're in the classroom, please know I've been waiting for you. This is a safe place where you can go when you need a friend. It is my commitment to provide natural ways to heal, and it is my mission to make awareness, responsibility, and truth a part of our everyday life. And I hope you, my listening, as well as my viewing friend, will feel empowered to embrace a new truth and live the life of your dreams. Now, as you know, I love the product Avazzia. As a matter of fact, they will be joining us, the legal family, the First Alternative Therapies, they're going to be joining us on April 6th at the I Am the Solution Natural Health Summit. That is how I met Dr. John Silva. The first time I took a class for First Alternative, he was the teacher who did the advanced training for protocols. Then just about a month ago, I went to another class, and guess who was the teacher? It was Dr. John Silva. But this time, not only was he talking about Avazzia and the protocols there, I also discovered he has branched into neurofeedback. What's neurofeedback? Well, he's going to share a lot more about this. So like I said, grab your pencil and paper, because this is going to be an informative class as always. And since it is our sole purpose in life to give and receive love and knowledge, I am grateful that Dr. John Silva is here with us today to do just that. Welcome, Dr. Silva, to the classroom.
Thank you, Lily. It's a pleasure to join you. I know we've talked about this show in the past and when we met each other at Avazzia events. So thank you. It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, I am very curious, because the first time I met you, I mean, I saw some little miracles. I don't know if you remember this. This was probably your first course that you taught for Avazzia. And there was a
Mhm.
young lady who had scoliosis, and you had treated her, and her spine, her is it scapula? Is it scapula in the back?
Yeah.
They were
Mhm.
like this. And by the time we were done with your presentation, her back had straightened up. We had done other things on her back, and it was just amazing. 3 months after that encounter, I was in a car accident, and I had purchased my unit at that time, and I was able to just heal the pain, heal my body, with the unit that I had purchased,
Yeah.
even though I was surgical. So I love Avazzia, and I thought I was going to have you back to talk about Avazzia, and I'd love for that. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that. But mostly this neurofeedback that you have really gotten really involved in. So share a little bit about your background and what
Sure.
led you to think outside the box, first of all, to look at microcurrent and then neurofeedback.
Sure. Yeah, I do remember that class. In fact, yes, I think was my first class. And I believe, if I remember, Upledger Institute in Palm Beach,
It
right?
was, it
Yes. Yeah,
was,
that was a wonderful
absolutely.
class. A
Yeah,
lot of great people there, big facility.
yeah,
They were very gracious to us, and yeah, that was interesting, and it's been quite a journey with the legal family, First
yeah,
Alternatives, and the Avazzia technology.
yes,
I talk to a lot of my patients and people on a day-to-day basis, and I've got it narrowed down to several different therapies. You can call them biohacking technologies, and Avazzia is clear on that list. I mean, I travel with it all the time. In fact,
yeah,
I have it in my backpack with me, as I'm sure you probably do, and those of us that use
yes.
Avazzia. And it's interesting because I've now taken, and as a lot of practitioners do with any technologies they know work and have so many different applications, I've branched off into, as you learn in the class, and using it to also help with brain function, depending on the model that you have. But maybe we can talk about that
Mhm.
later in the show. So yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I remember that class, that girl with the significant scoliosis and
Yeah,
the
that was it. That blew me away. I
yeah.
got to see it with my own eyes. So, for those of you who want to learn more about Avazzia, I'll go ahead and put a link below in the description. And if you use my name, they'll give you free shipping if you're interested in getting your own Avazzia or learning more. We're going to be, or come to April 6th, because the first alternative people are going to be there giving free samples of their techniques and and you'll be able to try it. It's experiential, so you can experience it yourself. So from Avazzia, I can understand as a chiropractor making this move to Avazzia and using that as a tool to
Mhm.
help heal your patients. But how did you go about your personal story of moving into neurofeedback?
Sure. So take you back to my journey. I graduated Life University in Marietta, Georgia. Let's see, that was 2001 as a chiropractic physician, and started my career as any chiropractor in private practice. Actually, I worked for a personal injury clinic down in Broward County here in Florida for the first year. Got pretty upset about that whole process. It was just the same in and out every day, and I knew I wanted to do more. So branched off, started my own clinical practice. And I've always had an open mind for anything, especially wellness-based self-improvement. I mean, I've been doing self-improvement stuff, going to Tony Robbins seminars and looking at so-called biohacking technologies. I don't think that word even existed back then, since I was probably in my early 20s. So my career was just a natural progression of that. And I've always been wellness oriented. Met my wife, who at that time was when we met back in the 90s, was my girlfriend, but she worked in the natural health foods industry. So it just became this family affair, and opened my practice. Of course, doing the traditional chiropractic stuff, some of the common modalities such as ultrasound and muscle stim, but then started to learn about other technologies, such as low-level laser therapy, and how that had a more beneficial effect for a variety of different musculoskeletal neurological problems. In fact, we got so entrenched with doing low-level laser therapy that I went off to Canada to learn of a technique using acupressure points, predominantly on the ears, but also on the forearms and wrists, to help people with quitting smoking. So we did that for several years. In fact, that was a big part of my practice when I first opened, was helping people that came in for a one-time treatment and they quit smoking using low-level laser therapy. That continued to evolve and got into a number of other therapies, um, pulse electromagnetic field therapy, and a variety of things. So again, always having this open mind. Did a lot of postgraduate training over the years, learned from some of the best docs out there, and was introduced to the Avazzia technology, and I think it was 2015, 2016 when I met Michael Legal. And I had already been using, as you might recall from when in the class this back in January, I spoke of this other German-based technology that I was using that was a lot more expensive, great results. And at that time, I was really heavily involved in helping mostly older adults and seniors with peripheral neuropathies.
Mhm.
And along comes the Avazzia, and started using that. I'm like, wow, this is the small battery operated device that's a
Yeah.
fraction of the price that is actually getting better results, and I have so many more applications for it. So point being is I've always had an open mind, always wanted to explore how I can best serve my patients.
Mhm.
So it was back in roughly about 2009, 2010, that my son Ethan, started having some struggles. And back in this time, he was about 9 or 10 years old, actually. And he started developing this ever worsening anxiety. And just give you a little background on him and again, our family. He's our only child. Now he's 22, but our only child still. They never stop being your child.
Yeah. Yeah. My baby's
But
33.
yeah, there you go. So yeah, otherwise healthy kid growing up. I mean, rarely ever sick. And of course, growing up in a natural environment, anytime we have the sniffles or a cold or something, we reach for our natural remedies. only one time in his life that I could recall that he was on antibiotics, and it was a necessity because he had a spider bite that started to turn into a MRSA infection. So at that point, you don't mess around.
No.
You go the medical route. So great great relations with a lot of friends, academically doing well in school, and then over that course of 9 or 10 years old, he started developing this anxiety that seemed to have come out of nowhere. It was really strange. And it got to the point where he had several bad panic attacks during those months. And I'll never forget one of the last panic attacks he had. And even the panic attacks themselves really came out of nothing. There was nothing that my wife and I could relate to after we finally got him calmed down that would have initiated this. It wasn't like it was a bad day at school or he was being bullied. And we always discussed these things. He was always open with us. But I remember when we finally got him calmed down, he made a comment. I don't remember exactly what the words were, but he just felt his brain was out of control and he couldn't consciously control it. And the next thing that he mentioned was in line with what we would deem as suicidal ideations. He was just felt like he was going crazy. And here's a 10-year-old telling me this. So I still get chills every time I think about this conversation we had with him. So we finally got him to bed. It was a school night. So my wife and I had a long discussion that night, and the last thing we wanted to do was to go the medical route of pharmaceuticals, especially for a 10-year-old.
Mhm.
So interestingly enough, about 2 weeks later, I was in Orlando for a neurological conference, functional neurological conference, and was introduced to QEEG brain mapping, which we'll talk about,
Mhm.
and took literature home that week, studied it to the nth degree, kept calling the company and asking a number of questions of the engineers and the doctors there. And I said, if for nothing else, let me see if we can do this brain mapping process to see if there's something going on in his brain that is initiating this anxiety, these panic attacks. And he was also starting to develop OCD, which was ever worsening during those months as well. So I made the investment for no reason at all, but just to be able to look at his brain function. He was the first person that I did a brain map on. And of course, I was new to all this. So working with my mentors with the technology that I used, they were able to guide me through the process of interpreting the data, looking at the brain maps, and it was quite evident from what they showed me that he was struggling, and you could see where the source of the struggle was. So we got busy doing neurofeedback therapy. It took about 4 months to fully resolve his anxiety, his panic attacks, and yeah, the rest is history. I mean, this kid, if you were to meet him now at 22 years old, he just turned 22 a couple weeks ago.
Mhm.
He is the most mellow, laid back kid. You never know that he had this in his lifetime that caused that extreme anxiety. So uh, I've come to realize too, especially now that it's completely transformed my practice. It's predominantly all I offer now is neurofeedback and helping people through their anxiety, through their depression, through whatever brain-based disorders they might have. But I've come to realize that, I mean, it can hit us at any time in life. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter the age. I'm working with kids now as young as 4 or 5 years old that are
Mm.
developing symptoms that you wouldn't see until teenage years or even young adult years. So it's becoming more and more prevalent. Of course, in the last several years, with everything that's been going on with COVID and geopolitical issues, this stuff isn't present even for our kids. I mean, they're seeing it on
Yes.
social media, they're seeing it on television, they're hearing their parents talk about these conversations. So it's been an interesting journey. So that's
Yeah.
what really shifted my practice into what I currently do. Yeah.
But do you do any chiropractic care in your practice, or are you doing only biofeedback?
Almost exclusively biofeedback or neurofeedback, but I still do
Oh,
have a few patients that have been with me for years. I can't turn them away. I still have a physical practice that I'm at part-time. So yeah, I still do
mm,
chiropractic treatment as well.
very
Yeah.
good, very good. Okay,
Yeah.
so I said biofeedback, neurofeedback. What is the difference between the two? And help us understand what biofeedback is,
Yeah,
or
sure.
neurofeedback.
So the biofeedback, it comes in different forms. This is a form of biofeedback, but specifically for the brain.
Mhm.
So I'll give you a brief description. So first, it's been around since about the early 1970s. So it's not anything new. Of course, with advancements in computers and computer technology, it's come a long way. In fact, and we can talk about this as well. I now have most of my clients or patients actually self-treating at home with neurofeedback equipment that's been scaled down to be home use, home based. So no longer have to come to my clinic or any other neurofeedback clinic on a weekly basis. We can actually do it from home. But what neurofeedback is, and I'll just kind of take you through if you're actually experiencing it yourself. I have people sit in front of either a television or a laptop computer. They will have sensors on their scalp, anywhere between 2 to 3 sensors. And these sensors are held on their scalp with a little bit of conductive paste that washes right off after they're done. They have 2 sensors as ear clips on the earlobes. And there's nothing emitted from these sensors. There's no microcurrent. There's nothing. These are simply sensors that are picking up on brainwave activity through the skull and scalp. That information is conveyed into a little black box, which attaches to a laptop computer. That black box is called an amplifier. It basically breaks down the brain waves that are generated underneath the sensors, and then the software computes all that. And what it does is it gives the person, or more importantly, the person's brain feedback as to how it is functioning in real time. So, if as from a user's perspective, someone doing neurofeedback, what they are doing is they simply get to choose a video, whether it's something on streaming on Netflix or YouTube. Doesn't matter what the content is, they just choose something that's going to hold their attention for a half hour. So it could be a movie, a sitcom, a TED Talks on YouTube. And as they're watching the video image is going to fade in and out, almost as if someone's taken the brightness control on your device display or your computer display and keeps moving it up and down on you. Okay. What that is doing is prompting your brain to better self-regulate. So now I'm going to take you at the level. So that's the user experience. And the cool thing about this is, as someone doing the neurofeedback session, they don't actually have to do anything. They simply just have to pay attention to their video and be entertained by, say, a movie that they've chosen to watch. They're not consciously having to regulate the process. They're not having to figure out how to keep the screen bright. What's happening is at a subconscious level, their brain is doing the interaction. So neurofeedback uses what's called operant conditioning. So we're conditioning the brain to seek these rewards. So when a person starts their session, the screen is in this dim state. They can still see what they're watching, but it's dark. And subconsciously, the brain doesn't like that. And this is quite amazing. Think of all the things that our brain has to process moment by moment, whether we're asleep or whether we're awake. Something as trivial as just watching a movie on a laptop computer, your brain pays attention to that. And it's not accustomed to trying to watch video in this dim state. So what it does is it tries to figure out, what do I need to do to get this to go bright, which is I'm accustomed to my whole life, watching videos or movies. And what we're doing is we're getting the brain to shift its brainwave activity into more optimal normal range. And when the brain does that and it meets a specific threshold that is programmed into that person's specific protocol, the brain gets a reward. And the reward is the screen goes bright. Now, the brain maybe maintains that for just a few seconds, maybe up to a full minute. But at some point, the brain kind of falters back to its hardwired patterns that have been established probably over a lifetime because of different stressors, and the screen goes dim. But now the brain has memory of what it did in previous repetitions to get that screen to go bright. So during a typical half-hour session, again, the person's just watching this movie as the video fades in and out. And they're simply just enjoying the process as their brain is now creating these new neural connections. We call this neuroplasticity. It's the brain's ability to create these new neural connections, these new neural networks, to bypass the old faulty ones that are responsible for our cognitive issues, our behavioral issues, our emotional upset or emotional issues. That makes sense?
Absolutely. I mean, I've got lots. I mean, I was taking lots of notes while you were speaking, and I'm sure all of you are too. So so for those of you who are watching or listening on podcasts, just know that if you have any questions, you can always ask questions, and then I can send them to Dr. Silva, or maybe we are actually going to do a follow-up, because I'm going to go through this process. We're going to videotape me at his office. And
Yes.
so and he's going to come back and we're going to explain what this is. But I have lots of questions, because first, when you were talking about anybody can watch anything. So of course, I'm going to gravitate to a comedy. And so we can watch this. And what are we watching on? So how do you control a Netflix, for example, or whatever? Do you have to have a special computer that monitors the brightness and not the,
Yes.
okay?
So I provide my patients a neurofeedback system, which has proprietary software that controls that video fade through streaming video, whether it be Netflix or Amazon Prime, YouTube. Yeah, so I provide that. Now, in days past, and I've been doing this remotely, I call it remote neurofeedback now, home-based neurofeedback for about the past 5 years. Prior to that, as with any neurofeedback clinic, and there's still plenty of neurofeedback clinics that operate in a clinical setting where you go to the clinic 2 to 3 times a week. You
Yeah.
sit down in a room, they usually have it projected onto a big television, and you do your neurofeedback session and you leave and you repeat that process over the course of several weeks. Well, what I've done is with the advancements in these technologies, and one of the neurofeedback systems that I use is they've scaled that system down first to make the software simple to use. I mean, if you have any basic computer skills, you can operate an iPhone, you can
Okay.
operate the software.
Okay.
Then I also show my patients how to put the sensors in place, and that's very simple as well. In fact, I work with people who live locally who can get to my practice, and we do what's called an onboarding session.
Hmm.
So we take about 90 minutes is all it takes. I show them how to use the software, how to use the hardware, how to put the sensors in place. I monitor about 15 to 20 minutes of an actual session. But again, in years past, I now work with people who I never personally meet.
Yeah.
They may find me through referral or through my promotions that I do through podcasts and such, and they're from New York or they're from California. So we ship the equipment down. We set up an onboarding session just in a virtual world on Zoom, and I guide them through the process. And what's really neat about this is I'm able to look at their neurofeedback sessions in real time. I can see what their brain is
Wow.
doing through my version of the software as I'm speaking to them through Zoom. So it's so cool how computer technology has changed our lives. So it's something that can be done from home. Now, with the system that I provide, using an HDMI cord, they can also project this up onto a big television if they want. But it can simply be done on a laptop. So it's equipment that I basically provide on loan while they're going through their neurofeedback training program.
Okay, so now that opens up another, what are you seeing on your end? So I'm seeing, because I haven't done this yet for all of you who are wondering, I haven't done it yet. I'm going to be doing it soon. So I'm seeing a screen going, lighter or
Mhm.
darker. My brain is doing whatever it is that it's doing. On your end, what are you looking for? And can you see abnormalities? And what do those abnormalities alert you to do?
Yes, great question. So there's a number of different metrics that we're able to see. And when a person does a session, I'm not always able to watch their sessions in
Yeah.
real time because I've got a number of people I'm working with me at any given time. So what I do is typically once or twice a week, I am looking at recordings of that person's half-hour session. And basically, I have a graph such as a timeline showing. I wish I could show you the visual, but just imagine a graph 0 to 30 minutes out, and you see these squiggly lines representing each one of the four primary brainwave states that we're looking at. So
Mm-hmm.
delta brainwaves, theta brainwaves, alpha, and beta. And I'm looking for patterns in those brainwaves to sense that one, their brain is responding well for that particular session, and over time, I'm also looking for patterns of continued improvement. There's also a number of numerical metrics that we look at to know how their brain not only did that session, but the cumulative effect of multiple sessions. So one thing about neurofeedback, it's not like a one and done. It's a process. It takes time. And in fact, I like to refer to neurofeedback as more of a training than a therapy.
Okay.
It's like going to the gym and training your muscles. You can't expect to go just a couple of times to the gym and feel stronger, physically physically see bigger muscles. You got to repeat that process several times a week, and you got to continue that for several months before you can feel and see that difference. The brain is much like muscles, and we can create that muscle memory through continued neurofeedback sessions to a point where most of the people that I work with were able to resolve their issues. And we're talking issues sometimes that have plagued them their whole life.
Yeah. Can
And
you
if
give
not
some
completely
examples of
resolved.
some success
Mhm.
stories that you can share?
Sure. So I've come to specialize through a lot of my postgraduate training. There's different types of neurofeedback.
Mm.
There's one specifically for trauma, for emotional trauma, or what we
Okay.
would constitute as PTSD, and of course the resulting anxiety and depression that typically comes from emotional trauma. Those are some of the most profound changes I've seen in individuals, but I've had some people that have come to my practice. I mean, some of the drama or the trauma that they've experienced throughout their lifetime, dating back to when they were children, is enough to make a drama series. It's incredible some of the stories you hear from people, and it's so upsetting to me to know that people can be so abusive to each other, and people can experience such bad things. And to see what neurofeedback can do to integrate those what I call functional scars, because that's what's happening. It's these traumas and these events in our life leave behind these functional disrupted brainwave patterns that, if not addressed, you can do all the talk therapy and counseling. And I'm not knocking these things. People get to a certain point, but they seem to plateau. And there's definitely no medications that are able to address this. And then you have them start doing this specific type of neurofeedback. I've seen people with, I mean, full-blown panic that sometimes can't even get to my office because their anxiety is so bad that their spouse has to like coerce them to come in. We managed to do an assessment, an evaluation, and get them going on neurofeedback. And within sometimes just a couple of weeks, you see this veil just lift. They start calming down. They're not on edge all the time. They're not in this fight flight drive. They're starting to smile. They're starting to become more with their social environment. And then to the point where it's like they look back like, wow, I can't believe that I suffered like this all these years. So I'll give you an example. I had a young gal come to me, and this is back when we were still doing this in the clinical setting. She was a nursing student, two children, and just kind of like my son's experience over the course of a couple of years, just this ever worsening anxiety that turned into social anxiety. So to the point where she could not even leave her home, had to stop her studies for her nursing degree, could barely get out of bed, and her left her husband having to take care of the family most of the day. She was just really in a bad place. I forget how she came to my practice, but this is one of those examples where her husband took whatever he could to coerce her to come in for her evaluation. She almost canceled it. Came in, she talked to myself, my staff. We did a QEEG brain map, which we can talk about. That really identified what was going on with her brainwave activity that led to this anxiety and this extreme panic. And we described the process to her, and her type of neurofeedback was a bit different. When we do trauma neurofeedback, instead of watching a video, we have the person sit quietly with headphones on, eyes closed, as they relax, listening to their favorite relaxing music. Doesn't matter who the artist or genre, just something they relax to. And what's happening, the method of feedback in that situation is the volume of the music fluctuates up and down. And yeah, I think it was 3 sessions in, she gets out of the chair and she's like, I just felt really, really calm during that session, like something I've never experienced before. And that just continued over the course of those first 2 weeks. In fact, by the time we were done with her first month of therapy, as far as she's concerned, her anxiety was resolved. And this is someone again who had been suffering for about 2 years. So, and
Wow.
she had tried counseling, she had tried some anti-anxiety medications, had some really nasty side effects with those. So she felt that there was nothing else for her to do. And again, how she came to my practice, I forget exactly, but that's the kind of power that your brain has, because ultimately it's your brain going through this process that has the power to be able to take you through this and finally resolve these circumstances.
So here's the missing link for me, because I'm listening to you and it all makes
Mhm,
sense because as a coach, I work with people and I know that you're not knocking coaching or therapy or
mhm,
anything like that, and neither am I. But as a coach, we go through some of the rewriting of their trauma, rewriting of their perspective, and we turn it into a blessing. And that's what we work towards, is turning it into a blessing. I can tell you from, the moment that it clicks in their mind that they're seeing it differently. So as they're watching or listening to music or watching a video, I am not understanding how that is resolving their trauma, how that is resolving.
Okay.
How does the brain know that her watching this or listening to this is now going to resolve a trauma that they've had and not even be able to address it? How does it do it?
Sure. Let me explain it from the perspective of how our brains function, and I'll keep it very basic. So when we look at brain function, first, let's look at the structure and anatomy of our brain.
Mhm.
It's just a bundle of neurons, nerve cells. And there's billions of them that make these very complex, intricate connections, neural networks that we've been able to identify through EEG, through functional MRI for decades now. So we know there's specific neural networks for things like executive function, attention,
Yeah.
focus, even our emotional well-being. We know that there's parts of the brain that are responsible for certain behaviors, certain emotional traits. So it comes down to how our brain waves function. So when we look at brain waves, and I'll just go through some basics, we have
Mhm.
our slow brain waves called delta brain waves. Those are
Mhm.
most commonly associated with sleep.
Okay.
We have our next fastest brain waves are theta brain waves, then alpha, beta, then we have high beta, and then we even have gamma, which we don't really um, do anything with neurofeedback. It's tough to measure and do anything with. So what happens is throughout our lifetime, mainly through emotional stressors and traumas, and when I speak of trauma, by the way, yes, we have trauma-specific neurofeedback, but think about this: throughout our whole lifetime we experience the equivalent of significant trauma events. Just take your average day-to-day stress, especially someone who lives in a stressful environment, stressful household, stressful relationship. Those day-to-day stresses have a bioaccumulative effect. And what these stressors do is they cause a disruption of the brainwave activity. So we know that these four delta, theta, alpha brainwaves, when we measure them on QEEG, QEEG is, by the way, quantitative electroencephalogram. It's a mouthful, so I simply call it QEEG or brain mapping. So what we do is we are able to look at each region of the brain. We're able to identify the four brainwaves, and we're able to see if any of those four, or perhaps all four, are outside of the normal range of operation. And this is mapped out. It's quite interesting because we actually get a picture of a head map. So we have these brainwaves, and they can because of stressors, either biochemical, emotional, or even physical stressors. You take car accidents, sports injuries, hits to the head. All these things can disrupt how our brains function through these brain waves. So when we do QEEG brain mapping, we're looking at an actual map of the brain, identifying each part of the brain, and we're able to see the delta, theta, alpha brain waves mapped out using colors. So it makes it easy for me to relate to my clients. And basically, we use colors like red and yellow to identify where their brain waves might be too high, beyond the normal range for that individual. And then we use colors like blue and dark blue to identify where their brain waves are too low. The output of their brain waves is too low. So I equate it to like a weather map. You see a weather map on the Weather Channel or in the newspaper. They use reds and yellows to indicate high temperatures or high pressures, and blues to indicate low. So similar fashion. And we can identify where their anxiety might be coming from, where their depression might be coming from,
Mhm.
because of these what we call dysregulated brainwave patterns.
Okay.
And in fact, that alone is so insightful and helpful for people when they can finally see in black and white and color in a report where their brain wave function is at. And again, I try to keep it as simple as possible. And of course, the visuals go much longer than me trying to describe it through the program today.
Yeah.
But that alone just gives, it's like an aha moment. People like, oh my gosh, all these years I've been suffering and I've tried this and I've tried that.
Yeah.
This whole time it's just my brain not functioning properly. And I can see it right here with these colors. My delta brain waves are too high, or my beta brain waves are too low. And we've come to know in neuroscience for decades now, we can map out specific patterns that relate to things like ADD and ADHD.
Mhm.
We see specific patterns that relate to anxiety or panic. In fact, if any of your audience has ever heard of the Amen clinics, Dr. Daniel Amen,
Yeah.
they use something similar called SPECT scanning.
Mhm.
And his work through his clinics throughout the country, they've been able to identify specific patterns in the SPECT scan that relate to specific uh,
Like
diagnoses.
yeah,
We do the same
dementia.
thing with
Yeah. Yeah.
QE brain mapping. Yep.
Yeah.
So that alone is powerful. And then we take that information, and that's how we develop our neurofeedback training protocol unique to that individual and where their brain is at that moment in their life. And then the neurofeedback process, as I described before, what that's doing is teaching their brain and giving it a reward every time, for instance, it lowers its delta brain waves and, for instance, brings up its low beta brain waves. And when it meets a certain threshold, it gets a reward. And that's when the screen goes bright. And the brain recognizes that as a reward and says, oh, this is something that I figured out. I like this, but it can only maintain that for a period of time. And then the screen goes dim again. But now
Okay.
the brain has memory. So did that connect the dots a bit better?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I still have another follow-up question to that
Sure.
because let's say somebody's watching a murder mystery or somebody's being chased, they're watching somebody being chased. How do you account for their brainwave activity and their perception of what they're seeing with that they need help and that they have too much of this or too little of that?
Sure. Excellent question. Well, first, I typically, when I set people off on neurofeedback sessions, I try to steer them away from anything horrific, anything overly dramatic, because we don't want
You
to
don't
put
have
our
to worry
brain in
about it
this.
with me. I never watch that stuff. Okay.
So I write my general recommendation is something neutral or on the light side. So a
Okay.
comedy movie or a romance movie or documentaries, something that'll hold their attention.
Yeah, you got to be
And
careful with those romance movies too.
yeah, yeah, true.
Overactive, overactive. Okay. So that's fascinating. That's fascinating. And so I'm looking forward to doing it and understanding because I have shared that through the years I've developed especially this last year, I've developed some issues with sleep and I would love to know what's causing because my cortisol levels are fine. I've had, there's no reason other than I don't like anything on my checklist. I mean, I don't like anything on my checklist. I want to get it all done. And even when I'm tired and I go to bed and I lay down it and I'm like, okay, well, I could possibly do one more thing and I could possibly do more thing. So I need to bring that those levels. And so, hey, this is where we take 100% responsibility for our life. And it starts with me. I can't change you. I can only work on myself. So I want to encourage all of you to go to whenyouneedafriend.com and start the process of learning and growing how our lives can be better. You see, I didn't know. I mean, I thought my life was great. I just didn't know I could make it better. Sometimes we get so comfortable in our life. And so making it better is not necessarily a bad thing. It's like when I'm not asking for you to seek perfection that is unattainable. I'm looking for things that you can manipulate and control that might make it better. So go to whenyouneedafriend.com, check out the conversations there. While you're there, please subscribe, like and follow me on all social media. Now, for those of you who want to know a little bit more than this, if you're a subscriber to my website, whenyouneedafriend.com, then you have all of Dr. Silva's information and you'll be able to reach out to him and have a conversation with him or whatever it is that you need to do. So I want to encourage you to do that first and share this video because I'm sure I can't imagine any of you not relating to this right now. Can you relate? I mean, can give me some emojis or write a comment. And the reason why you do that is because when you do that, it keeps the algorithms from squashing us down. And of course, when you're doing this to yourself and you're learning about how to entrain your brain or how to your brain adapt to what needs to be for improvement for you, then that means you may not have to take that pill. And my registered service mark is you can take a pill, you can take responsibility. Not against the pill. I am for doing everything. This sounds like it's a missing link for some of us to really work on ourselves. You can also go to my sponsors page, support our sponsors the way they're supporting the classroom. There's the Shop Now bag. You are welcome to go in there and look at all these Lilly products that are supported by me, endorsed by me. Some of those are affiliate programs and other ones are not. I just want you to know that this is something that I absolutely love. So make sure you go there and check it out and support the classroom. That's a way you can support the classroom. Another way that you can support the classroom is by being a donor, an enrolled student in the classroom, whether it's $1 or $1,000 a month or a one-time donation, whatever the case might be. Whether it's your time, your talent, your treasure. Like I said, sharing this video is a way to help out the classroom. That's part of helping the classroom grow. But whatever you can do, we are grateful for. Another thing that you can do is you can join us on April 6th. I'm going to try to convince Dr. Silva to bring his equipment on April 6th and be a part of the I Am the Solution Natural Health Summit. We're going to have so many wonderful speakers and vendors, and we'll get to like put our hands into everything and try to see what it is that we want for ourselves, not what the doctor says we need, but what we want for ourselves by listening to doctors who really want what's best for you, in the sense that they will share the information, and if it's something that clicks with you, then that's where you need to look. And be curious about all this stuff instead of critical, so that you can decide whether or not this is something for you or not. So go to whenyouneedafriend.com. There's a pop-up there, register. Now, if you're saying, yeah, I'd like to go, but finances are tight, if you send me a text at 407-373-5959 or email me at lily@whenyouneedafriend.com and you put in code Lily001, I'm giving away two tickets to come to the summit. So don't let anything stop you. Enjoy, listen to your intuition and join us. Today we are talking with Dr. John Silva, someone that I've respected from afar and I've had a couple of times the pleasure of meeting. And he is now really focusing on neurofeedback. I've heard about it. I think I even tried it at a conference one time, and I kid you not, the woman said I had no brain function. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens when I go see Dr. Silva, because I said I don't want to do it remotely. I want to go there, and I want you to show me how to do these little things so that we can make sure I do have brain function in my brain. So if you would like to get a hold of Dr. Silva, you can go to drjohnsilva.com, or you can just go to the blog. If you are a subscriber in the classroom, you can go and just click on his name and it'll take you straight there. I want to thank you, Dr. Silva, for being a part of this, because this is such important information and the missing link for some people. Yes, talking and reformatting and reframing things is important, but if there's a missing, if there's a firing of your neurons that are not connecting to another one, like you said, neuroplasticity, if that's an issue in our brain, it doesn't matter how much they talk to me if it's not connecting. So is there anything going on? You had mentioned that you do sometimes do specials for podcasts. I don't know if you're doing it. I thought to put you on the spot there, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe next time you come, we can have a special once we do our next class. Don't want to put you on the spot. But is there anything going on that people can enjoy? Any courses, any that you're going to be doing anytime soon that people can look into?
No courses at the moment. I am definitely going to look into the April 6th event. I think that'll be fascinating. Maybe we can try to set up some type of demo, because
Yeah.
again, to see it is one thing, to experience it hands-on or be in a clinic is another thing when you can see it. I do my best to try to describe it, so hopefully your listening audience and yourself were able to understand some of these concepts.
Yeah.
But I do offer what I can do offer for your listeners is a complimentary virtual consultation, because I realize there might be people that do not live here in Florida or the Treasure Coast, which is where my clinical practice is. And again, much of my work is remote these days. I work with people throughout the country from coast to coast. So if they go to my website, Dr. John Silva, JohnSilva.com, you can self-schedule at a time that's convenient. We will meet through Zoom for about a half hour, just discuss what you might have going on, or if it's a family member or perhaps a child suffering with ADD, ADHD, or other neurodevelopmental problems. Let's at least open up that conversation and figure out what the next best step is. For those people that are able to get to my clinic, usually Typical next best step would be to do the QEEG brain mapping, which is
Yeah.
non-invasive, takes about 90 minutes in the office.
90
But again,
minutes?
the
Ni
technology has gotten to a point where we can also work with someone completely remote. We don't necessarily have to do a QEEG. We have a number of different computerized assessments that you can complete from the convenience of your home. I run through those, provide you a summary report where it's still able to identify parts of your brain that are just out of balance or weak. And then we can work with you remotely to start you on the neurofeedback training. I monitor your sessions remotely. We meet on a regular basis and we still see the same great outcomes. So again, you can go to my website and we can get you scheduled for a complimentary consultation.
Well, that's very generous. Thank you so much. Now, you talked about the QEEG and it's 90 minutes. So obviously that's not going to be a demo. So what are you looking for there? Because I remember I did this at a conference. I can't remember what conference it was, but the woman, and I think that that's what she had these probes on my head, and when she took them off, and she was really rude. She was very rude. And
Oh
so
no,
she said to me, "Oh, you have no brain function." I'm thinking, okay, well,
that's not
um,
very nice.
no, I think I might have because I'm breathing and I'm standing right in front of you. So she just like dismissed me and had to go to somebody else. So I don't know. Is that what you're looking for? Is brain function? What are you
I'm not
looking
sure what you experienced there, but yeah, I would never tell anyone they don't have any brain function, that we cease to exist at that
She said,
point.
"You're all red. You're all red. You don't have any brain function." Could it be that you didn't stick it in my head? Could it be you? But anyway,
Yeah,
I didn't.
so the process, well, the whole visit is 90 minutes. I have a couple of computerized assessments that look at cognitive function. We look at emotional well-being, of course, intake paperwork and such. The actual QEEG brain mapping is about a half hour.
Okay.
And it's really quite simple. We have a specially designed cap that goes on the head. Think of it as like a shower cap that has a cord that attaches to the hardware, my computer. And I basically, these sensors don't emit anything into the head or the brain. We use a little bit of conductive gel to amplify
Yeah.
the brain waves coming from the scalp. And the person simply sits in a nice, comfortable recliner. We do some recordings first with their eyes closed. I usually have some relaxing music playing in the background. We dimly light the room, and they just relax. And there's nothing that they have to consciously focus on or think about. I just tell them to just relax. And we get a set of recordings with eyes closed, and then I have them open their eyes, and we repeat that process. And it's typically about a 24-hour turnaround time for me to get my clinical report back. And then at that point, I do my interpretation and we either meet in person, again, for folks that might live locally, or we meet virtually to review a report that basically shows them visuals identifying, again, each part of their brain and how those brain waves are outside of that normal range and how that relates to XYZ condition that they're suffering with. And then from there, that gives me a good indication of how much neurofeedback they may need over what duration. And if there's any other therapies or interventions that I also offer that work synergistically with neurofeedback. The cool thing about QEEG brain mapping, again, not only does it provide us these nice visuals, these maps to identify where someone's depression or anxiety or ADD is coming from, but it also can give us some insight as to any specific mineral deficiencies, specific nutrient deficiencies, and I provide that list to my clients. It can also show us if the source of their poor brain function is coming from potential biotoxins. We
Mm.
can even drive it down even further to say that this toxin is probably more likely a heavy metal toxin. So we can start to open up that conversation. And through my years of functional medicine training, I'm well versed in helping people to detoxify toxins such as heavy metals, molds. In fact, going back to my son's condition as we opened our conversation today,
Mm.
that was the primary driving force as to why he started developing his OCD and anxiety, was because we were dealing with what I suspected to be at that time, but wasn't confirmed, was a mold issue. And mold is very toxic to our brains and really
Wow.
wreaks havoc on our neurological function. So we can really start to see this. And then in those cases, of course, along with their neurofeedback training, I'll also make recommendations on specific nutritional supplements, dietary guidelines, lifestyle changes, and such.
Very good, very good. I am really excited about this because like I said, I think what she did was a QEEG. It sounds very similar to it. And there were colors like red, there was yellow, there was
Yeah,
green, and
that
there
was
was
probably
I
it.
don't know if it was blue, but for her to say there was um no brain function, there was a particular part of my brain, and off you go. It was off
Lily,
you go.
you
Okay.
know, I think I can relate. I think I know who. We'll have to have this conversation
Yeah, we'll have the
outside of the truck,
conversation
but I think
privately.
I know who you're referring to now, actually.
I knew that if I talked long enough, you would know if it was that person. But yeah, but anyway, so let's. I want to go a little deeper here because I know that there are certain times where there's a product or a tool that we use. There's some indication. Who can benefit from this? What kind of conditions or diagnoses would benefit from this QEEG or neurofeedback, and who does not?
Okay, great question. Anybody and everybody. We typically don't start neurofeedback until, if it's a child, until they're about 5 or 6 years old. But beyond that age, anybody and everybody. And I'll share why. I've worked with some significant conditions, neurological conditions. In fact, there is again, as I mentioned before, there's specific types of neurofeedback for specific conditions like trauma. We even have specific neurofeedback training protocols for seizures and epilepsy. And I have seen kids as well as adults be able to significantly reduce their seizure activity, or even in some cases, I've even seen complete resolution. So, and the way I describe seizures, and this could be a whole nother topic, but seizures are basically the brain short circuiting. It's these brain waves that are just really not functioning well, and it's the brain trying to reset itself. But unfortunately, it manifests in these seizures, and of course, seizures can be a variety of different intensity.
And then you,
And we
and then the
have
allopathic community introduces drugs that make the
drugs,
seizures.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And why I say anybody and everybody, it's suitable for really anybody. The only time that I have not seen this work for an individual is on occasion I'll get someone who in their later years, 70s, 80s, with dementia that has progressed too far. At that point, we really can't recover 20, 30 years of damage to their brain. But beyond that, in between and every other condition is suitable for it. Also, there's a whole nother aspect of using neurofeedback for peak performance. So I work with a lot of professional athletes, musicians, CEOs, executives who are just looking to tap that little bit more
Hmm.
out of their life. And think about this. Your brain controls and regulates every single emotion, every single thought,
Mm-hmm.
every day of our lives. Everything that we do, our physical well-being, all of our physiological processes like heart rate, our food digesting, our ability to move from A to B and drive our car, all done masterfully by our brain. So when it is not in an optimized state, we can start to have just even little things that we notice. So I work with a lot of people who are doing this. In fact, in more recent years, not because they're suffering with anxiety or struggles with cognitive issues. They're doing it because they just want to just take their life to that next level. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where things get really, really exciting in this kind of biohacking realm. And there's been some clinics or facilities that have opened up using neurofeedback as well as other biohacking tools and technologies to help people enter these deep states of meditation, relaxation to really expand their consciousness and subconscious to elevate their life to that next level. And neurofeedback has that application as well. In fact, my personal favorite type of neurofeedback that I've done over the years is called alpha theta training.
Mm-hmm.
Using the technology in an eyes closed state while your brain hears different frequencies. And the experience is quite profound. You go into these deep states of relaxation, meditation. In fact, it's a wonderful way to kind of biohack your brain in a natural way into deep states of meditation that it would take otherwise years for experienced meditators or Buddhist monks to achieve. We can do that in just a couple sessions.
Very good.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
good. Okay, so believe it or not, 55 minutes is almost over here for our time together. If somebody were to just be like, they're looking at it premiere and they're just watching this live and they're just tuning in right now, what would be your advice to them when it comes to, um, you know, problems with their nervous system that,
Mhm.
they're feeling lost, they're depressed, anxious, ADHD, ADD, OCD, you name whatever diagnosis that they've been given. What kind of hope is there with this neurofeedback?
There's a lot of hope, and we're seeing, especially with the advent of these technologies where people can do this from home, it's becoming more cost effective, more convenient. We're seeing more momentum in the recognition of this. Again, this neurofeedback's been around since the 1970s.
Hmm.
But because of where technology has taken us in so many industries, we're starting to have more and more people becoming aware of it. And we just need more awareness because this really can be a life changer. That's why it's transformed my practice. This is predominantly all I do these days because it's just wonderful to give back to people. And I'm kind of a nerd or tech geek. So I love the technology part of it. I love the neuroscience. But to use that and see people flourish and see people come out of these dark places in their life, or to see kids be able to not struggle through school anymore, be disruptive and at home, and it's so rewarding. And one thing I want to leave your listening audience is, if you're noticing anything that you just described, you just rattled off a number of different either diagnoses or sleep. Take sleep, for instance. Sleep. If you're struggling either getting to sleep, getting a restful night's sleep, or perhaps you're waking up several times, struggling to get back to sleep, or you're simply just waking up and you're not full of energy as you were as a child, because that should extend through our whole adult life. People look at you like you're crazy. What? Think of yourself as a child. That's how you should wake up every morning, most mornings. People lose that as we age. It's because of brain function. So if you're noticing sleep issues, again, struggles with forgetfulness. I mean, how many people nowadays, they walk into a room like, I know I was going here to do something and I forgot what it was. It happens to all of us.
All of
The
us,
key
yeah.
takeaway, and I learned this from Dr. Daniel Amen years ago, by the time you're recognizing these things, and we all kind of laugh it off, it's just, oh, it's just my age, it's everyone else around me is going through the same struggles. It's not a laughable matter, because by the time we recognize these things, it's been about 15 to 20 years of the brain just going down this progressional dysfunctional state that, again, is measurable through QEEG. So now would be the time to at least investigate, look into, to see what kind of hope you have in line for yourself or your child or family.
Wonderful. Well, this is part one. We're going to come together. I'm going to hopefully find out that I have brain function in my brain. And we're going to have part two. And for those of you who want to learn more, you can reach out to me. We'll be getting back together soon. So thank you so much, Dr. Silva, for coming into the classroom and
You are
sharing
welcome.
this
Thank you, Lillian.
valuable information. I'm looking forward to it. I really am. And please remember, we'll be right here waiting for you worldwide at whenyouneedafriend.com. This is Lillian McDermott and Dr. John Silva wishing you love, peace, joy, and unexpected abundance. Make it the best day ever. Good job. Good job.
The opinions and advice expressed on the Lillian McDermott radio show are intended for the individual callers and guests on the program and are presented to our wider audience solely for general educational purposes. Please act responsibly and consult personally with your own medical, psychological, or nutritional expert before taking